Hey guys, Pelican here. It's been a while since I played ESO, but I'm back for now. And I'm excited to showcase my Acuity DK build, which you might have seen me using in the latest 1vx video that I posted. This build is not just good for solo PvP, it also performs exceptionally well in duels and group PvP, battlegrounds. I've tested it in all those scenarios, and it's pretty much just in my opinion, the best all-rounder DK build to have now. It has insane bursts, like you will pretty much one-shot anyone who isn't a tank if you line up the combo correctly. So in this video, I'll go through my gear setup, and then I'll also be explaining some of the skills and how to use them effectively. So without further ado, let's get into the build. So before I start, this is the full build that I'm using. Feel free to take a screenshot if you're not interested in the explanations. The whole build is here. And now I'll start by going through the sets. I won't spend too much time on the sets. It's pretty much self-explanatory. Bloodspawn, pretty much the best monster set to run on any DK build. Bloodspawn is made for DK. Acuity is our front bar set. Since we are a crit DK build, we are using Acuity to get all our crit. So you will have a lot of damage when this set is up. And you'll be pairing it with corrosive armor to get a lot of damage. So that's how we're going to be doing. That's how we'll be doing damage on this build. We'll just wait for Acuity and corrosive and line them up. Rallying Cry is our back bar set. This is pretty much the best overall set for PvP. You pretty much need this no matter where you are. If you are in a group, you can have someone else run it, and you can use something else like Daedric Trickery instead. But if you are not, you should be running this set on the back bar. And for our mythic, we are using Markin. Death Dealer's Feat is also a really good option, but personally I feel like Markin is more for Dragon Knight because Dragon Knight does have a minor brutality, so it does buff the weapon damage a lot more. So I recommend Markin instead. And lastly, we are using a One Piece Trainee for HP to make up for the extra slot we have. And now I'll be going through the traits and enchants. For the armor enchants is pretty much standard, it's just all tri-stat enchantment. For our rings, okay, for the rings you definitely need an infused reduced cost. You just need one, and the whole reason we're using this is because of Cinderstorm. So having an infused reduction cost basically makes Cinderstorm free. So I feel like any DK should be running it just for the fact that you have pretty much a very strong free AoE heal. For the other enchants, I'm just running infused weapon damage. Bloodthirsty is very good now, but I feel like on this build, because we are pretty much nuking people from full health, I think infused makes a lot more sense. Plus, for solo PvP, usually you would want infused for more heals, but there's no harm running one or two Bloodthirsty pieces. Also very good choice. And for the enchantments, my weapons, on my front bar, I'm just running Shock and Poison. Shock for vulnerability to increase our burst, and Poison because it goes very well with the DK passive. You also get some stam regen. And on the back bar, I'm running the weapon damage enchantment. You can also run Poison if you want. On this build, we'll be spending most of our time on the back bar, so the trait and enchantment you choose on your back bar is quite important compared to the front bar. So for our traits, okay, for the armor traits, I'm just going to say this is entirely up to you what you want to run. Like there's no like best option available. It completely depends on your playstyle. But you should run at least reinforce on the chest. But as for the other traits, personally I roll a lot. If you watch my videos, I roll a lot on any class. Even something like Acuity DK, I still roll a lot. So I like to run a lot of well-fitted. But if you're not that type, you can also run Sturdy. You can run Impen, you can even run like Invigorating or Divines if you want. There's really no like set option. It all depends on your playstyle. So evaluate your playstyle and see what you do the most. Like if you block a lot, then recommend Sturdy. And if you roll a lot like me, well fitted is good. If you want more defense, go Impen. You can also go Reinforce on the heavy pieces. Speaking of which, for my armor setup, again, armor setup also entirely up to you. But I'm running 4 medium, 2 heavy, and 1 light. I've experimented with 5 heavy, 4 heavy, 3, 2, 1 heavy pieces. Personally, I like 4 medium and 2 heavy the most. But I'm just going to say that even if you're in 5 heavy, 1 medium, 1 light, you're still going to be doing a lot of burst damage. So if you prefer a more heavy playstyle, you can choose to run more heavy. But if you're like me, you like a more mobile, more stem-based playstyle, you can go more medium. And I guess that's all for... Oh yeah, for my front bar, I'm running Axis. This is pretty much self-explanatory. We are running a crit build. We want as much crit as possible. On my current setup, I believe I've around 100% more crit damage. So it's a lot of damage when Acuity is up. And for the back bar, it's also a matter of preference. I personally prefer defending. Keep in mind we are spending like 80% of our time on back bar, so it's really important what trait you're going to put on the back bar. You can choose to go powered. You can even choose to go decisive if you want more corrosive uptime. But personally, I think defending is the best. So that's all for the gear. I'm going to go through the skills now. So let's start with the front bar. And you can see what I mean by, we're going to spend most of our time on the back bar because there's nothing on the front bar that really help us survive, except maybe corrosive. Our front bar is all offensive skills. So I'll be going through them. First up is Deep Breath. This is an AoE delayed burst ability. And it hits a lot harder than most people think. Like, the tooltip is about 90% of Maxox's curse. So it hits really hard. Like, normally with corrosive I crit people for between 6 to 8k on the exhale, and it also interrupts like casters, which can be really good in the 1vx. And the initial hit, although it does not heal for much, when you're fighting a lot of people and when you have corrosive and acuity up, you can pretty much full health in 1 deep breath, so it's really good for staying alive as well on the offensive. And next up is Shattering Rocks. Is the other morph of Fossilize. We don't use Fossilize because we are not using Power Lash. Shattering Rocks heals for a lot. Like, I've seen it crit for like 6 or 7k. So it's also a really good heal to keep you alive on the offense. Next up is Engulfing Flames. This is your debuff. It's also a pretty good damage over time. You notice we don't have Burning Embers or Venom Claw. We are only using Engulfing Flames. This is because we are a burst build. We are not looking for pressure. The reason we are using Engulfing is to apply the flame damage debuff to make them take more damage from our burst. And you can also kind of use this as a spammable, like, with corrosive and acuity up, you can crit for like 4 or 5k. It's really good against Nightblades who are in stealth. A lot of Nightblades dispatch from the cloak buff. Next up is Molten Whip. This is your main burst. So the way you're going to go around using this is you'll try to build up all the stacks and then try to maintain the stacks, and when you're ready, you're just going to use Shattering and then whip them. This will hit really hard with corrosive up. I've hit people for as much as like 18k. Most of the time, damage is somewhere between 11 and 15k crit hits, and they're all guaranteed crits because we have acuity, so it's really nice. You can also spam this to take down like weaker targets without your buffs up. And lastly, we have Flames of Oblivion. This is a really good passive damage skill, but one of the main reasons we are using this and Engulfing Flames is also to proc our Molten Whip. So it's also a pretty good AoE skill. Like, sometimes when I need a lot of AoE, sometimes I will also spam this instead of like engulfing flames. I like to spam this sometimes to hit people around me and also buff my whip at the same time. So let me go into the ultimate first. So corrosive armor is, I'm just going to say in my opinion, is the strongest PvP ultimate in the game by far. It's not only a defensive out, like you pretty much can't die on this unless you're fighting like more than 5 people, since it makes you take like 1k damage max. But what's so strong about this is the fact that it also gives you like 100k pen, so you pretty much ignore the armor of your opponents. And because our build has literally no pen, like I'm probably sitting at like 1k pen or something, this can like potentially double our damage against some people. So we will focus our burst. We only try to go on the offense when this ability is up. So this whole build is technically built around corrosive armor. And now I'll be quickly going through how the burst works. So first of all, you're going to want to get your Flames of Oblivion up. You're going to want to get your 3 stacks of Molten Whip, and ideally try and apply flames to your enemy. And then next up, you're going to pop corrosive, build Acuity up. And when you're ready, what you want to do is you want to cast Deep Breath, and then Fossilize, and then Whip. And ideally, you should time it such that your Flames of Oblivion will go off together at the same time as Deep Breath. Okay, so the best way to do that, I will show you, is to first cast Flames of Oblivion, and then just pretend I have corrosive. So let's cast Flames of Oblivion first, and then corrosive, engulfing flames, Deep Breath, and then you whip. And when you see that timer on my debuff, on my buff tracker, when the instant the timer hits 10, that's when the fireball will go out. So try to time Deep Breath and Flames of Oblivion together, and you'll pretty much just one-shot your opponent together with Shattering and Whip. So that's the general idea of how our burst works on this build. Okay, I could also share some clips. I'll share some clips right now, so you can see these are a few examples of how the burst kind of works. It takes a bit of practice to get the timing right, but once you got it, it should be pretty easy. Alright, so let's move on to our back bar. On the back bar is pretty much all your defensive skills. You can play this build without even, like, you can survive a Zerg without even going to the front bar at all, because everything you need to survive is on the back bar. First up, we have Volatile Armor. This is pretty much necessary, it's your armor skill. And the reason I chose to go Volatile over Harden, although I really like the damage shield on Harden Ward, is because of the fact that the Volatile Armor damage over time hits pretty hard. But more importantly, it also applies burning. It also has a chance of applying burning status effect. The damage reflect can also apply burning. So with these two, you can constantly proc burning, especially if there's a lot of enemies around you. You can constantly proc burning on them and get a lot of sustain back from the combustion passive. So that's the reason why I chose this over Harden, so that I can get more burning procs and also do more damage. Next up is Cinderstorm. This is one of your 3 heals, and we are running the infused reduction glyph to make this skill virtually free. This is a pretty cheesy skill. You just place this down and just stand in it, and it will heal you for a lot. It takes good practice to use this skill comfortably in a 1vx. You constantly have to reposition yourself, so you have to recast this skill a lot. But recasting is not a bad idea, because I mean, you will be proccing the Earthen Heart passive a lot for ultimate, so it's a good thing as well. And generally what you want to do is just try and stay in Cinder as much as possible, and stack it with Vigor, whole block, roll in it, cast Coax. You will be very hard to kill in Cinderstorm, and it's also free. Next up is Race Against Time. This is your mobility skill. It's also your damage. Usually DKs, they are like tanks, they don't have a lot of mobility, but on this build we do have we are able to run around pretty quickly, and I think it's pretty important because we're not using sword and board. We can't just hold block at one place and survive. You get overrun really fast, so mobility is a really important part of our gameplay. That's why I'm using Race Against Time. Not to mention, it also gives you 10% crit damage, so try to have this up when you burst. You will add a lot of damage to your burst. Next up is Resolving Vigor. This is kind of your main heal, I guess. Well, it's a main heal over time. It also gives you minor resolve. It's your only stem skill. I mean, if you don't consider whip, this is pretty much your only stem skill, so it should be pretty easy to sustain considering we are running Bear Haunch and Stem Pots. And lastly is Coagulating. This is your oh shit button. It's your burst heal. Coagulating heals a lot. I'm pretty sure it heals the most out of like any heal spammable. I've seen it crit as much as 18k. Like, especially since we are on a crit build. We have a lot of crit damage. You can heal for really, really high amounts. Stacks with your resto passive when you're low. So it's a really good like emergency button, but you have to use it sparingly because it does drain your stem quite quick. It does drain your mag quite quickly, so you can't just spam it all the time. And finally, for our ultimate, I'm using Resto Out. I mainly use this for defensive purposes, although you could kind of use it for offense since it gives you major force. But as much as possible, try to keep your ultimate for corrosive, so you can nuke people while defending. But if you are in a really like dire situation, yeah, Resto Out is there to save you, and you can even try and go for a burst with it since you get major force. So that's all for the abilities. Now I'll just be going through the rest of the stuff. So firstly, let's start with my attributes. Attributes again is completely up to your own preference. I like to have 30k health and 18k stam. If you need more health or more stam, feel free to just reallocate some mag. Max mag is not really that important, especially if you're good at managing your resources. You shouldn't be running out of magicka. Now for the mundus, you don't have to run Atro. I personally just feel a lot more comfortable with more regen, and I still feel like I have more than enough damage without Shadowstone. But if you do not mind, doing more resto heavies, you can definitely go Shadow for more damage or any other stone you want. Sustain shouldn't be a problem on this if you're able to get a lot of resto heavies off. Atro is honestly a bit overkill, but it's just my personal preference. For my food, no doubt, just run Smoke Bear Haunch is the best PvP food. Pretty much use it on any class right now. And I'm also a stage 3 vamp. Same thing, stage 3 vamp in my opinion is pretty much needed for PvP. Undeath is just way too good to give up. And I think part of the reason is also why MagDK is in a good spot now, since almost everyone is a vamp, so take more flame damage. And for my potions, okay, this is a little controversial, the potion that I'm running. But as a MagDK, yes, you're seeing that correctly, I'm running stamina weapon damage potions. So the reason why I'm doing this is because DK has minor brutality, so it doesn't make sense to run sorcery potions because it doesn't stack with the minor brutality. So you have to get major brutality somehow, and I think the best way to do that is from this potion. And you might be thinking, oh, the crit, the weapon crit is kind of useless. I mean, we already have Acuity to carry us on crit, and not to mention we already have Flames of Oblivion on our front bar as well. So why crit? That's because without it, our crit will only be at 18%. And that's pretty bad news when we are trying to survive on the back bar without Acuity. Your heals are not going to crit much if you're only at 18%. And that means that your Rallying Cry isn't going to be proccing a lot. So it's going to be very hard to survive. in my opinion, without without weapon crit on your back bar. That's why I'm using this potion. Some of you might be worried about not having enough max sustain. I had that worry at first too, but honestly, with resto stuff, and especially if you're in more heavy pieces, sustain shouldn't be a problem at all. I'm sustaining fine on a Khajiit, so and that's also the reason why I run Khajiit is to get crit damage for my crit build. Now, I personally think Khajiit might not be the best option. I just went for it because it just seemed obvious to use Khajiit on a crit build. But if you're like me and you prefer Atro over like Shadow for open world PvP, I think a better choice would be Breton. Like you could go Breton and then run Shadow instead. I think that would be a better option, especially if you're in heavy armor, because Breton's spell resist will complement your heavy armor a lot. So that's also another consideration. Other classes work as well. Dark Elf and High Elves should work. But personally, I think Khajiit and Breton are the best choices here. Lastly, I'll quickly go through my CP setup. For the blue tree, I'm running Cleansing Revival, Duelist Rebuff, Master at Arms, and Fighting Finesse. Cleansing Revival is honestly broken. It's bugged right now. You don't even need to be below 25% for it to proc. You can just proc randomly when you're above. And it's a full fight reset every time it procs. Highly recommend you run this on any setup, especially if you are playing open world. Duelist Rebuff is my defense, and I use Master at Arms because I want a lot of AoE damage on top of burst damage, which this will buff. And finally, Fighting Finesse helps with both my burst as well as my healing. For the red tree, I'm running Pain's Refuge, Survival Instincts, Sustained by Suffering, Rejuvenation. The last two is I basically just run it for my sustain. Survival Instincts is super OP for stem sustain. It's pretty much up all the time. And Pain's Refuge is pretty much mandatory if you're trying to do any kind of outnumbered PvP. It's just so OP, gives you a lot of resistance. And that's all for the build. So that's all for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and do leave a comment if you have any questions. And regarding my return to ESO, I'm not too sure whether I would stay for long because there's a lot of new games coming out like Starfield that I want to try. And besides, I feel like ESO is starting to be more of like a seasonal thing. Like I will only enjoy and play it if I'm in the mood for it. And before I quit, I was pretty much very burnt out. And I don't know how long it will be before I get burnt out again. But yeah, for the near future, I think I have plans to do more 1vx videos. I still have a lot of clips from the past few days that I haven't included that I wish to edit in a new video. And I'm also thinking of making some tier lists for PvP, specifically like ability tier lists. And I feel like that would be quite helpful to people looking to PvP. So yeah, that's all. If you guys have any suggestions as well, you can leave it in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video.